Hey tarot friends, it's Jade here with Tarot Truth. Welcome back to my channel. This is going to be the start of the second tutorial series that I promised, which was to do a tarot bag. This time we're going to do a knit style one. The one that you may have seen, this one here might look familiar. And actually, if you've watched my videos before, you'll notice that I did make a change. This previously had some pull ties, and I changed the closure to this style instead, and also did a border on that. So this is the crochet one. If you haven't seen it and you're more of a crocheter than a knitter, or you just like to get things done faster, then feel free to go and check out this tutorial. There's 5 videos in total because I break it down step by step and show you not only how to do it, but also, you know, really what the effect is of making some mistakes and how to fix them if you need to. So I will see if I can link that up in the top corner or and also in the description box below. Please do check that out, and I would love to see if you make any of these as well. I know the lovely Yvette over at the Witch of Willow Creek has been doing a VR series crocheting, and that's been really awesome to watch. Anyway, so those crocheted ones, I'd made a whole bunch of them, and actually this is off the press and I haven't even snipped the end of that anyways, but of that yet. But I've made a whole ton of these things, and it's time to do some knit ones. All right. So what are we going to do? The first step, step 1, decide what you want. Same as for the crochet ones. Do you want one like this, where you insert, I was going to say where you enter, where you insert the deck from the top, so along the short side, and that is of course my Muse Tarot. Or do you prefer the envelope style, where obviously you're putting the deck in sideways? I like both styles, and recently, at first I thought I was going to just do the envelope style, but what I've realized is that I really prefer to store my decks, like where I store my decks on the shelf. I find that I can get more on the shelf doing them this way. So I think that's what I'm going to do again for this video, in particular because I'm going to be doing mine for the one I'm going to knit along with you. I'm going to be doing for an oracle deck, which is wider anyways. So, and this is the Enchanted Map Tarot. All right, so decision made. I'm going to be making this this style where we insert the deck from the top. In terms of the closure, I'm going to make a decision later. I'm either going to do the same thing as here with a button, or perhaps I'll actually put in a buttonhole, or I may do something like this, or go back to this style, but I'll delay that decision until later. So step 1 was deciding what style. We've made that decision. Step 2 is picking your yarn and your needle size, knitting needle sizes. So a couple of things. I talked about in the intro video for the crochet series, I talked about the types of yarn that I use, that I prefer, that I recommend, but of course, you know, you can use whatever you have available or whatever your preference is. I'm going to use another self-striping yarn. This one is by Knit Picks, who is an online store. This yarn actually is discontinued, which really sucks because it's pretty awesome stuff. I'm using a 75-25, so 75% superwash merino and 25% wool. It is a worsted weight, so you can see how thick that is. And then needle sizes, if you need to know how to interpret the little instructions on the band here. It gives you some instructions here, but this actually is for both knitting and crochet. So if you're using knitting needles, then you can start, your own gauge if you are a knitter for worsted weight yarn. So you do whatever you need to. But if you're not a knitter, you're not sure, maybe you even have to buy a pair of knitting needles and yarn, then this is what you would do. So you'll look at the little label, and it might look something like this, or it might have a little diagram. And in this case, they're using number 6 to 9 needles. So 6, 7, 8, or 9 US size needles, or 4 millimeters all the way up to 6.5 millimeters for knitting. If you were using it for crochet, then you'd look at the crochet instructions. Okay. Again, I'll see if I will link the previous video so that you can have more info on yarn styles, yarn sizes, and whatnot. I did want to make one other point, which was it might have sounded like I was hating on acrylic, and I don't mean to sound that way. Just me personally, I think there's a yarn for everything, and I have used acrylic, and I do use some acrylic, especially if it's mixed in with something else. But for me, I have this tactile thing. I can't stand it. I can't stand the feel of it. I don't like the way that it looks, but again, that's just a personal preference. Some people need to use it because they're allergic to wool, or perhaps don't have any of the other blends around them. So please don't, I'm not hating it. I just think that a lot of people want to start learning to knit, sorry, and then they go and they pick up a cheap ball of yarn, and it's squeaky acrylic, which looks terrible, feels terrible, is hard to work with if you're a brand new knitter. It can be really hard to work with, and then they just give up because they think, well, this sucks. So I guess all I'm saying is use the best yarn that you have available to you, and if that's acrylic, that's absolutely fine, but please don't give up. If you don't like the feel of a particular yarn as you're working with it, just give it away, do something else with it, and get some different yarn. Try it out, see what works for you. Okay, so we have my yarn. Next thing is to pick the needle sizes. So I would normally use US number 8, which is a 5 millimeter needle, and in this case I'm going to use I think you could see that, US 7 or 4.5 millimeter needles, only because I'm using the other ones for a sweater that I'm working on that I really need to get back to. All right, so I have my yarn, I have my needles, and I have the deck that I'm knitting this for. All right, so what do we do? As per the previous, this is a little trick, by the way. People might have been wondering what I was doing on the last one. So tucked in is just the end. So if you want to unravel your yarn from the outside, then it's available. I prefer to unravel it from the inside, and the easiest way to get that out is just to stick your fingers in and twirl them around, and usually one strand gets attached to your finger and that comes out. Super easy, super simple. Put this over here. Okay. I'm going to pull some out here. All right, now, as per the previous series with crochet, this is going to be a mix of instructions for some fairly newer knitters and more experienced knitters. So take what you can from this video, ignore what you don't need or what you don't like. As always, this is my own pattern. I'm not, I just made this myself. And actually, this one here that I showed you was the first one that I knit, and lots of things that I learned from that one as I refined the recipe. Okay, so unlike for crochet where you can just start very close to the end of the yarn, for knitting you actually need to leave yourself some yarn. So I'm gonna leave, what's this, about 2 feet of yarn, which is way too much in this case. And you can, I'm going to assume that you have some basic knitting skills, but the easiest thing to do, I don't usually start with a slip knot, but just for those who are not used to this, start with a slip knot, grab, oh, I didn't talk about the needles actually, sorry. I'm using a set of circular needles, okay, so they're 2 needle tips connected by this cord. You can't use, I don't have any here, you can't really use straight needles. So straight needles are the ones that have so the needle tip on the pointy end on one side and then a stopper on the end, because we're going to be going around and around, and obviously the stopper would prevent you from doing that. So a couple of different things. I prefer these. I recommend these, especially if you're a newer knitter. But I've also used double pointed needles, in which case you're using either 4 needles or 5 needles. You can certainly do that as well. Obviously, if you're, for the purposes of this, I would recommend the circular ones just to make it a little bit less like you're trying to work like with a porcupine, especially if you're a newer knitter. All right, so we have the slip knot on the end, and we have 2 strands of yarn. So this end here ends in nothing, and this strand here leads to the a ball of yarn, which I just have over here. Oh my gosh, can I tell you that I have not, it's been quite a while since I've knit. Okay, so holding it like a slingshot, we have to cast on a number of stitches. So what we're going to do is go under here, over and across this one, and then through the loop that's formed by your thumb. You take your thumb out and pull the yarn. Okay, don't pull too tight. I'll show you a couple of different ways, but this is the normal long tail cast on. So under, over, through. Okay, under, over, through. So what this does is it casts on and sort of forms that first row for you. Another way, which I'll end up ripping it out. So the other thing you could do if it's easier for you is just take the end that leads to nothing, wrap it around your thumb like this, and just so the yarn that leads to your needle or your slip knot that I had is on the back of your thumb. The yarn that leads to nothing is on the front of your thumb. And if you just come across your hand here and grab the loop, pull out your thumb and pull it. So you can also do that. That's it's a super fast knitting method, or sort of cast on method, I should say. So you can see it does look a bit different. Look at the back side. It does look a bit different, right? So this looks more like the purl side, which is the back side of a knit stitch, whereas this is just the cast on here. So you can do either one. I prefer not to use this for casting on at the start of something, just because it is harder to come back and work with. And also if you're new, it can be hard to not do this super tight, and that makes it hard. So hard to knit it after. So I'm just going to pull those out and just go back to my cast on. All right, so how many do you cast on? Let's have a look here. Just spread them out. Remember that knitting is stretchy, actually more so than crochet, I would say. So if I put my card here, you can see that I still have about an inch to go. So I'm going to do a couple more. This isn't exactly the same as if you were doing crochet where you're just doing the whole chain. Okay, so we've covered basically from one side of the card to the next. If it looks like they're not evenly spaced, that's okay. That will sort itself out as we knit up the bag. So the first thing I want to do, as with the crochet style, I just want to, what I'm just giving you is a recipe for the very basic, easiest way to do this. So as with a crochet, we're going to knit the base of the deck first. So for me, that will be about this thick, so it's about an inch. So for me, that is this thickness here, which is about an inch. Don't know what's happening there. Strange. Okay. This is where the second needle comes into play. Now I have a whole lot extra yarn. You don't need this much. And for me, that's kind of a waste. I try not to waste things, so I'm going to rip that out. What I should have done was counted how many stitches I had, but I didn't. That's okay.
Nothing else.
This should be good. All right, now we have the width of our bag. This is where the second needle comes in. Now, I am a continental knitter, which means that I hold and tension the yarn in my left hand and I knit with my right. And all that means is, so you go through the stitch, grab the yarn, come out, right? I'm going to zoom this in a little bit. Through, grab the yarn, out. It's a very economic motion. You don't have to move your hands very, you don't have to use your hands move your hands very much, sorry. And as with a crochet, although it doesn't seem to be quite as bad with this setup, it's a bit, it's hard to split your attention between what you're doing and or looking at what I'm doing, looking at my hands versus looking through the screen to make sure I'm on camera. All right, So we've done our first row. This looks a little bit funky, and don't worry about it because it's not going to show up. You probably won't have that issue. This yarn was spun in the direction that as I was casting it on, it was unspinning. Or sorry, unraveling, yeah, I guess. So you could see all the individual sorry, I have a migraine today, so my words are missing. Anyway, it's fine. It's no big deal. You won't even see that. Okay. Now, if you are not a continental knitter, or if you have not knit before and want to try, I recommend you try both ways or multiple ways of knitting. But instead of going this way, some people knit with their yarn in their right hand. So in this case, same thing, you go through the stitch and you wrap around, back and off. Okay, try not to have the yarn loops so far away from the tips, right? As close as you can get them. This is the way that I first learned to knit when I was a kid. But there's a lot more movement, a lot more variation in my gauge, and doesn't seem to be as economic or as quick. I do know some very fast knitters this way though. So I'm not going to knock it. Now in terms of tensioning the yarn, well, for this yarn, I just loop it around one finger. That's it, and then control it, you know, with my fingers there. I should have talked about, so this is going to be another design element that you're going to have to decide on. What I'm doing is knitting on each side, right? So you see you'll see these rows. This fabric is called a garter. This is called garter stitch, where you're just knitting back and forth the same way. The reason that I do this for the bottom is because I want cushy fabric to protect my deck. But I will change once we get to knitting the walls or the sides of the bag. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee here. This is, there's a knit stitch. Sorry, I'm going to come back when I have about an inch long piece of fabric, okay? Okay, let's check it. Actually, it just occurs to me that I'm going to do that again. Okay. It just occurs to me I need to be more than an inch, because for my Oracle decks, I like to include the books if they're the same size as the Oracle, which this one is. And so that's how deep I need to do this. So I still have maybe 4 more rows and I'll be back.
Maybe 1 more row and then we'll check again.
Okay, so there we go. You can see that from that very awkward angle, the top of these stitches are right at the top of the deck. So we're good. Don't forget that, I mean, even if you came out just slightly under, don't forget that this is very cushy, very stretchy. So, okay. Oh my God, this bugs the hell out of me. But it's going to be hidden. You won't see it. So that's the only reason why I didn't pull that out. All right, so as with the crochet one, we now have the piece of fabric that is going to cover the back. And now what we need to do is build the walls. Actually, what I have to do now is pick up stitches on each side, right? So I'm gonna zoom out for that. I have all the stitches here. I'm gonna pick up stitches here along the bottom, the cast on edge, and then on the side, okay? And that's where the cable comes in. I'm gonna just grab some stitch markers. I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. I have my little stitch markers. I just keep them in this little, I don't know what came in this actually. Just have a whole bunch here. Now, if you're not really a knitter, then you can use anything. You can use a cut up piece of yarn in it or string in a different color. I've done that lots of times. You can use a paper clip. You can use, I've seen people use cut up straws. You can use a bobby, you can really use anything, okay? And it's really just to mark where you are. So I want to know, you know, when I'm done front and back on each side and the sides. So I'm gonna, and what I typically do is at the start of my, what will be a round, right now is a row, I like to put a stitch marker there that is a different color. So I'm gonna use, here, let's use one of these, okay? All right. So this is gonna be a little bit awkward, but if you look at this side and stretch it out, maybe I'll just do this a bit. And you can take this out for now if you want to, but. Okay, so if you stretch this out, I don't want to pick one up here because that's the loop that I'm in right now, right? So you kind of want to pick one up sort of in this knot here. Okay, that's one. I'm going to pick up another one here. Oops, split the fabric there. That is two. Can pick one up here, three. So now I'm not going in the knots, I'm going in the spaces right above those. That's four. That's five. And I'm going to do one in this knot so that I make sure the corner really pops. Oops. There. Okay. So I have 6 stitches. I'm going to put another stitch marker. Actually, you don't have to put one there. Just you can if you want. But and so now what we have is we have one full width and one depth side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this around, put the yarn to the back here, okay, and I'm going to pull. This probably helps. Okay, so just turn it around so that the point is facing to my right, the yarn is up and over, so it's out of the way, and I'm just going to pull these right off Just keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to pull it and I'm going to leave it actually on the cord part. Okay, you don't have to pull it all the way. I just left myself a nice big amount of cord there. Okay, so now what we've done one side and we've done this side, and now we're going to turn the corner again. So we don't want to go through that same one, right? So if we look here, here's a slip knot, which was my first stitch. There we go. Here's a slip knot, which was my first stitch. Okay, so we'll go through just the hole that's right under that. Oh, I split the yarn. Try that again. Okay, and now if we look, we've got a nice kind of a weird chain, but you can see it's got an easy pattern. And so basically just go into each one of those, or if you look at it from the side, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to see there's a gap there, this gap there, this gap there. That's where I'm going to pick up each of the stitches, and I like to go through 2 strands of yarn because and I'm going to cut out a bunch of that just because my family's out there yelling at each other. Okay, so one thing, we'll just get to the end here. Right, which is actually the beginning. All right, so what I want to do, I want to make sure I picked up the same number of stitches on the cast on edge as I had here, okay? So easiest way to do that is just to count. So how many did I have? 5, 10, 15, 18. So I need to make sure I have 18, 5, 10, 15, 18. Perfect. Okay, so now I need to just pick up on this side here. So I'm going to stick a stitch marker there. And remember, I had six stitches here on the side, so that's how many I need here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's always a bit awkward. Okay, so I have the same amount of stitches on both sides. It's going to feel kind of awkward, right? Because everything is all bunched together. I'm just going to tuck that in there. Okay, so again, we're going to turn it so that the point faces to my right. And now I have the cable in front of me, directly in front of me. And what I'm going to do is first I'm going to pull this front cable. Pull the stitches back on here. And then I'm going to pull that needle and bring it back in front of me. So now those ones are held safely on the cord, and these ones are in front of me. So now what we've done is build the base and connect everything so that we are now going to be knitting the walls of this, or the sides of this tarot deck bag. Actually, Oracle deck bag in this case. just keep knitting, just keep knitting. Just keep knitting. And you see that we are, sorry for the shaking. Coming up to that stitch marker, you just want to slide that over. And then just keep knitting. All right. So again, drop that one, turn this one around. You want to make sure that your yarn goes up and over, because otherwise you're going to unintentionally form another stitch. Just close those before it all drops. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, pull the cord, put the yarn back on here, pull this cord, and obviously you're going to have a little loop there. And you are just going to keep knitting. So now what you need to do is decide what you're going to do for the walls. You could just continue knitting all around, and because we're knitting in the round, right, it's just one big round, all you have to do is just keep knitting all the way. Okay, and a fabric, I will show you. Looks different, right, than it does down here. And that's because, so if you look at the back side of the knit stitches, what do you see? You see the purl bumps, right? You see the bumps. The bumps, so they have little collars on them. Whereas here they'll have little scarves on them. And that's what's forming here. So when we were just knitting back and forth, right, we would knit, and then so the front side would have these collars, and then the back side had these, sorry, the front side had these scarves, and the back side had these collars or nooses. And then we would turn it around essentially, and then we'd start knitting here, and then this side would have the collar, then the scarf or the V, and then this would have a collar on it. So that's why you have the fabric that looks like this. Anyways, probably really mucking up that explanation, but that is all you have to do. So you could keep doing this. If you just keep knitting, this is the fabric you're gonna get, right? It's just beautiful knit. I started that actually differently. So that's what you would get. You could introduce some fun elements. You could change the yarn. So here I added some yarn every few rows of a different color. And then the other thing I did was add a nice cable. And I did one on each side. And of course you can do it anywhere you like. I've got my Muse Tarot. Actually put a twist, which is not quite a cable, on each side. Actually, you can see it better there. So you could do that. And here I actually introduced a rib as well. So you see the knit stitch here and then a rib. So you can do anything you like with this. And sorry for the shaking. For this one, because I'm using a self-strapping yarn, I'm just going to knit. And the advantage of this for me is that I get the visual, you know, the lovely visual of the color changes. And I can just knit. I can knit actually without looking, so I don't need to look. I don't need to check, okay, is it time to put in the next cable yet? Is it time to put in the next color yet? I don't have to think about it. I just have to keep knitting. So I'm going to end this video here, and I'll do a part 2 for when I get to the top. If you have any questions about the knitting or how to knit, please leave me a comment down below. Let me know how this is working for you. Sorry. Still have some of whatever was in my lungs. So I apologize for this raspy, sexy voice. Anyway, so I was saying, if you have any questions or you're not sure about something, you have some questions and you can't find, sometimes it can be hard to find exactly what you're looking for on YouTube, especially if you're not a knitter and you don't know the names of the stitches and whatnot. It can be hard to find things sometimes. Let me know, drop me a line, drop me a message down below, or send me an email, and I will be happy to help guide you, or either to show you myself or guide you to a YouTube video that can help. Now, actually, just one thing. Because knitting is stretchy, it's definitely stretchier than crochet. Let's just try this out. Let me zoom out here. Okay, so I've taken the knitting off the needles, just left it on the cable. And it's probably going to be hard to see because we don't have enough knitting yet. There's not enough. I'll do another couple of rows and then show you before I log off. But what I was going to say was, this is probably going to be a little bit big for this deck. And I say that because when I cast on exactly exactly for the width of the deck. And remember, knitting is very stretchy. And I prefer my tarot deck bags to have a little bit of negative ease, which means that the fabric doesn't pucker. It's a little bit, if you were to measure the circumference, it's a little bit smaller than the size of the item that you're making for it, just like a sock. This one is probably going to be exactly the same size. It'll probably be just a touch larger than I would like, but that's okay. An example of that actually is this one, because you can see it's just a bit big for this deck. This actually isn't, the deck that's in here is not what I had made this for. So that's okay, right? It provides that extra bit of padding, but I think you can see there that it's a bit, it's a bit loose. It's not snug. My other ones, like this one, for example, this one is definitely snug and fits properly. The rib definitely helps because that pulls things in as well. But even just here, it's the right size. So another tip is that if you want your deck bags to be a little bit snugger, not quite as big, then make it just a little bit shy, a couple stitches shy of the size of the bag. And because, what's going on here? because the knitting these bags definitely takes longer than the crochet, I feel like it's doubly important to double check the size before you get too far, because it's less time that's wasted. I guess not really. I don't look at it as being wasted because you're just learning something, but for me, I'm impatient. I want the final product. There is, there are process knitters and there are product knitters. And process knitters just enjoy the act of knitting. So it doesn't matter what they're knitting, as long as they're just knitting, they're happy. And I know someone who just uses the same ball of yarn over and over and over. She knits something and then rips it out, starts knitting again. I am not that. I'm a product knitter, and I do enjoy the process of knitting. I find it extremely meditative. It helps the stress and anxiety, but I want the product. So if I make a mistake, not that big a deal. It can often just be a design element, but I prefer not to knit out an entire pouch and re-knit it completely if I can avoid it.
One more.
Okay, look what happened. I did promise to show you mistakes. Okay, so we have 6 stitches right here, which is on the side. And stitch marker. How many stitches do we have here? I count 5. Let's make sure that that just hasn't gone to the wrong spot. 5, 10, 15, 18. That's the right amount. 5, 10, 15, 18. That's the right amount. So sometimes the stitch marker slips, but what's happened here is that I have dropped a stitch right down to the beginning. So you can see it's a little bit loose here. All right, no big deal. So, okay, this does not, I don't remember the last time I dropped a stitch, but anyways, I want to pick one up, and so it's picked up there. I think I'm going to do it right in between these two. This is where your crochet hooks will come in. All right. Well, that's a bit of a pain. So, all right. So because here, let me see if I can zoom in here. Because we picked up stitches here, right? There's not another stitch to pick up. It just ran all the way down and then disappeared. So there is extra. That's why these are so loose here. right? Because that extra, the extra loop is now in there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do it in between this last stitch and the next one. And all I'm going to do, so I can actually, right, if I do this, what's going to happen is that it's going to pull the fabric from here, right, where it doesn't belong. Pull that. So I'm going to go right to the bottom, which would be here, right? Okay, so, sorry. Just need to be able to see what I'm doing here. Okay, so see all those loops? I'm just going to grab the one at the very bottom and going to pull it through. Okay. And now what I'm going to do, so you can use this actually at any time. So if you drop a stitch up here and it just runs down and you catch it, stick something on it, paper clip, whatever, just to grab it so it doesn't continue to run down. And you can do the same. You can do the same technique that I'm about to show you. So I've got this loop. I've pulled it to the front. Now you see all that. You see that ladder? So I'm just going to go up ladder rung by rung. So I'm going to pick up that one, and I'm going to. Oops. I don't usually use these crochet hooks. Okay, so I've created one loop, and then I'm going to go up the next rung, which is probably very hard for you to see. Okay, if you have metal crochet hooks, I promise that it will work better. Okay, so we've got two more. Okay, and one more. Okay, so now we're at the same level as everything else. We have to put it on here, right? So let's put these stitches back here. And all I'm going to do, pop that one off. Okay, and pop them back on. If you want to catch that one with something else, you can certainly do that. I didn't really need to, so. Okay, so now I have 6 stitches back on track. That is so funny. I think it's easier to do it this way. Oh my God. I think this is the easiest way. Guys, I'm showing you exactly what I do, so it's not always pretty. Although it's usually a little bit easier without the camera stuff in the way. Okay, so this is the other reason why if you do a different stitch, it's a little bit easier to tell what you're doing, because then you can just line it up so that the purl bumps are along the edge of your deck, right? And if you need to pull it a little bit, so much the better. I'm gonna say that, see, this is runs It's a little bit too much there, so I'm gonna try this again. I'm gonna try this on again once I have about another inch of knitting or so, just to double check, but this looks good to me. Yeah, looks good to me. We'll see. Again, like, you want it to be a little bit not you don't want it to be all scrunchy on there. You want it to be a little bit snug. Like, you want to be able to pull it a little bit. So I think we're good. Might be a little bit too long, but we'll check again once we get to the once we get about another inch or so done. So I'm going to cut the video off here, and I will come back to you once I'm a little bit farther along. Okay, bye.